Cinco de Mayo is a carbonate replacement deposit. The last resource calculated on it was by Mag Silver, its previous owner. Back in 2012, there's, I'll call it 155 million silver equivalent ounces, just to make it simple for everybody. It's an absolute monster. The world, one of the world's authorities on them, Peter McGaw, who has worked on that project since early 1990s, tells people that CRDs, and he teaches a university course in these, he tells people that CRDs typically run from 10 to 50 million tons. And this sits in a big belt of them that runs through the central South US, right down through the central of Mexico. And this one's only 12.5 million tons so far, but the community fell in disfavor with the mining company that had it in the past. And so for 13 years, no one's been able to do anything. And we're trying to change that.
Really, these last, I don't know, 12, $14, $15, whatever, has been all silver. I mean, there's dynamics right now in silver that are different. A lot of people have heard for years about all the different short positions that various houses had against silver, and all of a sudden, all the people wanted physical silver, and that exerted upward pressure on a price. So this is not an economic story; it's more a positioning story and a shortage story. Cash prices for silver in China a while ago were already $100 an ounce.
The greatest driver of it right now is strong investment demand and speculation. Couple that with persistent supply deficit for years, robust industrial demand, the macroeconomic and monetary policy factors affecting the world, and safe haven flows, geopolitical tensions, and market structure and technical issues with the trading and storage of it, and all of a sudden, bang, $65 silver. Mexico produces 25% of the world's silver. So, you don't have to think very far to understand that the Mexican government wants to capitalize on what we're talking about here. So all of a sudden, about face with federal government support for new mines, permits coming out, promises of many more permits to come to open pits, not just underground mines, and their ministers in the federal cabinet talking about supporting mining and trying to really turn the Mexican economy around on the back of mining. So hallelujah, I'm glad I'm in the space.
For disclosure purposes, our site does not make recommendations for purchases or sale of stocks, services, or products. Nothing on our site or this podcast should be construed as an offer or solicitation to buy or sell products or securities. All investing involves risk and possible losses. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For disclosure purposes, Apollo Silver is a paid-for client on the Investor Ideas website.
Chris and Andy, it's always great to have both of you on the show. I think the first place we have to start is silver this week has had a phenomenal end to the year. I think silver now costs more per ounce than a barrel of oil, and I think it's one of the top performing asset of 2025 at 110%. So Chris and Andy, I'd love your commentary on the close for this asset for the end of the year.
It took a long time, but silver started to get dragged farther upward by gold with gold's big move it had since summer. But really these last, I don't know, 12, $14, $15, whatever, has been all silver. I mean, there's dynamics right now in silver that are different. A lot of people have heard for years about all the different short positions that various houses had against silver, how the quote paper silver market was stretched more than is the case with most other commodities, gold included. And all of a sudden, the people wanted physical silver, and that exerted upward pressure on a price. So this is not an economic story; it's more a positioning story and a shortage story. And it's been a while ago. I don't know if you remember this, Andy. Cash prices for silver in China a while ago were already $100 an ounce.
Yeah, when I would guess the greatest driver of it right now is strong investment demand and speculation. But couple that with persistent supply deficit for years, robust industrial demand. We were talking before we started recording about the macroeconomic and monetary policy factors affecting the world, and safe haven flows, geopolitical tensions, and these market structure and technical issues with the trading and storage of it, and all of a sudden, bang, $65 silver, or I don't know, was it higher today? It's here we go.
Yeah.
Glad we're in the trade.
Yeah. And before we move on, Callie, too, we need to remember that at the Federal Reserve's meeting last week, they delivered a surprise beyond the hawkish rate cut, as it was called, that was expected. And that is they already have started quantitative easing again. They don't want to call it that, but I don't know what else you call it when they're going to buy $40 billion a month new of short-term treasury so that the world doesn't come unglued. So we can see what the future is. And when central banks are printing money hand over fist, Japan's still a wild card near term, could throw a monkey wrench into things because they're going to raise rates by the time people are watching this. But as that aside, the long-term trend is going to be no different than it's been for a while now. Huge debts, not only unpayable, but now unserviceable. In the way central banks respond is you print ever more money, and precious metals sure as hell aren't going to go down in that scenario.
It's great to see after years of talking about the super cycle and that we're finally in it, especially for silver. Obviously, the big news here is that Cinco de Mayo is a conversation that we can have again on the table. So, Andy, I would love for you to just go over a recap of the project.
Well, Cinco de Mayo is a carbonate replacement deposit. The last resource calculated on it was by Mag Silver, its previous owner. Back in 2012, there's, I'll call it 155 million silver equivalent ounces, just to make it simple for everybody, in two deposits. Those are primarily silver, lead, and zinc. There's another 500,000 gold equivalent ounces and another oxide deposit at surface. It's an absolute monster. One of the world's authorities on them, Peter McGaw, who has worked on that project since early 1990s, tells people that CRDs, and he teaches a university course in these, he tells people that CRDs typically run from 10 to 50 million tons. And this sits in a big belt of them that runs through the central South US, right down through the central of Mexico. And this one's only 12.5 million tons so far, 439 drill holes into it. All but 12 had mineralization, and even those 12 were altered. So it's big. It's in most people's minds barely touched. We can talk about some new discoveries that happened back in the day, but the community fell in disfavor with the mining company that had it in the past. And so for 13 years, no one's been able to do anything. And we're trying to change that.
Well, and when you first announced that you got an option on this project, Andy, you made very clear that this was going to be a bit of an uphill fight. You've got a lot of repair to do, but not because of your misdeeds, but other issues in the past. But you've got a great track record in that country. You're one of the better known mining executives in Mexico. Prime Mining, one of your creations, was just sold recently, and a lot of people are very happy about how well you did for them with that. So not very many people you could think of better to resurrect this thing. When I looked at your press release on Monday, as the 15th as we're recording this, folks, there's a lot of stuff that you put on the table. You're going in there and showing the locals that you're serious, you've got deep pockets, and you can make this a big winner for everybody. So give us a little bit of a flavor, the high points that you put on the table to get the locals back on side with you guys.
Well, so as you are well aware, there's been a lot of exploration there, but there needs to be a lot more exploration. Yeah. We'll need to go underground at some point. We need to drill the deposit off just to see how big it is. And then we'll have to start doing the economic studies and the permitting. And so it's a long process. And then, on the back of that, you expect to run a mine for 20 plus years. And well, maybe you model it on 10 to 15, but they usually run forever or longer. And so deals only work when they work for everybody. And for far too long, I think the mining industry has gone into various jurisdictions and tried to benefit their shareholders and the company, but probably at the expense of the local community. And so I don't think that, really, I mean, you only have to look at Africa and the messes there to understand that the mining companies did well and the communities didn't. And anyway, we've gone in looking for a partnership with the community. We still have to have a vote, but we've talked with several groups, including the executive of the Ejido, the local community, and we've reached an agreement to offer them north of £1 billion over a 30-year development plan. And we're looking for another term to extend that. But we've offered them something that will give them cash in their pockets every year, something that will give them preferred job status or preferred job opportunities, that will give them investment in the community. And so this is a farming community that struggles. They need some help. They need some support. They need irrigation for their fields. They need better water supply. I mean, they need a lot of things. And I've been there. The only thing that's going to help them is some big economic generator, some big economic engine. And really the only thing that's there is Cinco de Mayo. And so, yes, on Monday we announced what we think is a long-term favorable deal for the local community. We're going to hope that they're all going to vote on it early in the new year. And look, we brought groups of people to our meetings where we've had the engineering firm SEMA, ConAgua, the National Water Board for Mexico. We've had all the people in the room, the experts, to talk to the people about their concerns. Because, the first thing the average population thinks when they think of a mine in the region, they think, oh, is it going to mess up my water? What are the nasties? Is there going to be cyanide and blah, blah, blah? And what about this and that? And so we brought in all the right people, to the independents, the experts, to tell people what it is we want to do and how we want to do it in partnership with them and the impacts on them.
Well, and folks, I would encourage you to go back and read that December 15th news release that Apollo Silver put out, because it's all laid out in a lot of detail there. Several issues solely on environment, water, and things like that. And Andy, just so that people understand, your permitting process, such as it is essentially what you're talking about right now. You need to be vetted by the locals there. The federal government gives them pretty much the final say, correct?
That's correct. There's a local communal group called an Ejido, and this is the Ejido Benito Juarez. There's 385 members of it, and the federal government has given them the surface access to about 18,000 hectares of the 25,000 hectares that our mineral claims are comprised of. And so the deposits that we're interested in are underneath their surface rights. And look, there's people out there that say, well, there's some private land there. You could buy that. You could go underground from there, drift over to these deposits, and maybe you wouldn't even need any of the surface access rights. Well, okay, great. But you're not doing this in partnership with the community then. And that's what's got to be the piece that's fair here. So what the federal government's saying in Mexico, water and communities first and, mining second. Well, great. I got no issue with that. So yes, we want them to give us a 30-year access to the surface so we can go there, put our drills there, drill it off, and then head underground, and then the study, and ultimately put it in production. And if we can get that 30-year access, we're going to unlock a lot of value, not just for Apollo Silver, but for all the stakeholders, much like we did at Prime.
I think what's exciting is we've talked about this before on the podcast, that Calico is obviously a fantastic standalone project as it is, but this is the blue sky potential for Apollo as an add-on. I'd love to get into a little bit more on just the Mexico side, because again, everyone knows Mexico is an amazing silver production area, but the last couple of years have been not as great. As that's changing at the end of the year, even like Silver Tiger got their open permit, which everyone was wondering if that was ever going to happen again. And so it seems like a lot of things are moving and on the table. So I'd love both Chris and Andy to give some of your commentary on what you're seeing in Mexico and why you're excited.
2024 and 2025 were difficult years for those of us that spent a lot of our time advancing exploration and development in Mexico. the federal government shut down. I mean, tried to change the mining laws around how claims were recorded and put moratoriums on being able to stake new claims, and tried to wipe out the terms of older ones, and wasn't granting any new mining permits, and made things a lot more difficult. The flow of foreign investment into Mexico almost ceased completely. And as a consequence of that, the government, and I'm sure metal prices are having a piece to do with it, since Mexico produces 25% of the world's silver. So, you don't have to think very far to understand that the Mexican government wants to capitalize on what we're talking about here. So all of a sudden, about face with federal government support for new mines, permits coming out, promises of many more permits to come to open pits, not just underground mines, and their ministers in the federal cabinet talking about supporting mining and trying to really turn the Mexican economy around on the back of mining. So hallelujah, I'm glad I'm in the space,
Well, and that was, I think, the big change of everything. Obviously, AMLO tried to get the mining law changed. The Supreme Court down there shot him down, said it was too vague. Then they went back, were thinking about it again. President Scheinbaum, especially, apparently was thinking about the same thing, although she's much more of a pragmatist than AMLO was. I think you'll agree, Andy.
Agreed.
And you're right. I mean, you don't need to look any farther than doubling and then some of the silver price this year to get a lot of monkeys off of her back,
Mhm.
fiscally with their budget and everything else. And yeah, I mean, the one thing that I thought was still going to be the deal breaker was they didn't want to have any more open pit minings. But now, if they're going to start approving those with all of the proper safeguards, of course, for the environment and water, I mean, it could be a new day there.
I saw the other day that they're changing the tax structure, so they're going to start charging mining companies a lot more money on the surface tax, the payments you have to make initially, say to set up a mine. And for an underground mine that only maybe needs to disturb 120 acres or hectares on surface, it's not going to cost them that much money. But for a big open pit, say the size of Discovery Silver's Cordero, the tax payment's going to be $30 million to get that thing started. And keep in mind that the deposit will pay for that, especially given the price of silver these days and the size of production. But nonetheless, the government is looking at significant tax revenues from turning these around. So yes, it looks like they're going to stamp a bunch of open pits.
As we come to the close of 2025, Apollo feels like it's on the best trajectory possible with Calico that you just announced your exploration plans, and development plans for 2026, and with Cinco de Mayo now a conversation again, and silver prices. It really doesn't get any better. Chris, do you want to give a little bit of commentary, and then Andy, anything that you want to add to about the Calico project for today as well?
Well, real quick, Allie, as we alluded to a few minutes ago, you can't be anything but bullish long term on silver and gold. I'm concerned near term that we could see a liquidity event or some kind of a credit market shock in the world. We're very much overdue for that, frankly. And one of the dynamics going into the new year that I think is going to be extremely interesting to watch is you've got, not to get too far afield, a lingering and arguably worsening inflation dynamic in the US with a lingering and potentially worsening deflation dynamic in China. But both countries, along with everybody else, choking on debts, which I mentioned earlier, have gone from unpayable to now they're even unserviceable, a lot of these debts. So long term, there is no question that it's going to take just ever more money printing to keep all of these balls in the air and keep everything from imploding. And of course, that's been a story since back in 1971, President Nixon took us off the gold standard and we were $35 an ounce. And even when you throw silver in, there is not a single better performing asset percentage-wise since that point in time. Not real estate, not stocks, it's been gold. And that and silver and other commodities will continue going forward. Near term, we could get a lot more choppy if all of a sudden there was a scramble for liquidity. So I love the macro setup in that regard. And I think that as far as if we shift to Calico really quick before we leave this conversation, you've got in the U.S. three critical minerals in one of the best approaching development stage projects that there is with Calico, Andy. And I know that you guys announced last week you're going to do some metallurgical drilling, some other stuff that is going to kind of shift us from the exploration and developing the resource to getting this thing camera ready, if you will.
Yeah, Calico's been around for a long time. It's a well-known historic district from well over 100 years ago. I mean, anybody that's been in Knott's Berry Farm or on the highway from LA to Vegas knows the Calico ghost town, and it's not new. And then Asarco drilled it off in the 80s. Pan American bought it from them, and we did a deal with Pan American. It's had a lot of drilling. And I'm going to breach 43-101 here, but there's 125 million measured and indicated ounces. There's another about 59 million inferred. So, collectively there's 185 million ounces of silver there. There's another 3.4 million tons of barite, which you said is critical and is indeed critical to the U.S. petroleum and gas industry. And there's a bunch of zinc there. And there's a new gold discovery there that's up 130,000 ounces and growing. It's had all of the exploration work on that silver barite zinc deposit. It doesn't need more. It needs to have some work done on the metallurgy, then some geotech drilling. And just to remind everybody, it's on private land. We pay fee simple taxes. We've even purchased, or Asarco did purchase the mill site property, which in California needs to be off of your deposit. So
right.
It's ready to go. The prices are heading in the right direction for us. And I think it's just a matter of time that, you follow that highway, you go by Rio Tinto's borax mine, then you go by Calico, and then you go by Equinox's Castle Mountain gold mine, and then the Mountain Pass, the rare earth. So it's mining area. It's in the right commodity, the right jurisdiction, the right time. So, bring it on.
I actually got last week, I was at the annual meeting of the American Exploration and Mining Association down in Reno, and I got a new appreciation for just how dire the zinc situation is now.
Yeah.
As far as the supply demand. I knew generally speaking how bad it was, but now I've got a lot more details to go with it. And we're going to be crying for more zinc development in this country sooner rather than later. It just isn't there on the table yet.
For a lot of years, we've pushed mineral exploration, development, and production, refining and smelting outside of North America. It went to Asia and other parts of the world, and now we're beholden to them. And the only way to turn that around is because now in this Cold War, economic Cold War that we're having between us and them, and you can pick what side you're on, but because of that, there's not this cooperation anymore of global trade that we had. It's more I've got this and I'm not sharing it with you. And so we have a problem with all these metals, all of them. So it means a lot of money's coming our way, right? We got to put the money in, and
ultimately.
And it doesn't happen overnight. That's the thing. It takes years to go from exploration concept through discovery, drill off a discovery, and all the economics and blah, blah, blah. It takes years.
Well, you've probably followed the company that I listened to their main project guy, South 32 Hermosa down in Arizona.
Yep.
Major zinc project. They've got some copper and some other metals, and they're trying to get into production. And when you look at the shortfall in the next 7 or 8 years, there needs to be 3 of them built per year in the US to meet our shortfall. No
Well,
way in hell that's going to happen.
no,
You're not going to get 3 more a year. You may not get 3 more, period,
that's right.
between now and the middle of the next decade.
That's
So then
right.
what do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean your deposit's going to look ever juicier on all of these fronts: the silver, the zinc, the barite, which we don't produce in the U.S. either.
I remember when I first came into this industry in the 80s, there was so much exploration and development in North America. And then and in the 90s, it just left.
Yeah,
And it went to South America, Africa, Asia. And that was the theme through the 2000s and the 2010s as well. It's been gone for 30 plus years. So, for it finally to head back our way. And I'm happy to see the governments, with the foresight, I guess, to say, hey, we got to support this stuff because
yeah,
it's not going to happen fast enough with the industry alone. We're going to have to
right.
take some risks here. We're going to have to put public money into this. Bing, bang, bong,
Yeah. Well, the guy that put out that latest list of 60 critical minerals, the head of the USGS, was one of our lunch speakers last week, and he said, and he wasn't the first person I've heard this from, and you just alluded to the time frame, Andy, that one of the stupidest things this country did back in the 90s was to abolish the Bureau of Mines.
Yeah,
And we're the only major country on the planet really doesn't have such an agency as that. I
right.
mean, even Europe, which is more bass backwards than we are, most of the
Hmm.
countries, they still have mining bureaus. We don't.
My,
And so yeah, we put ourselves so far behind the eight ball. It's going to be a major catch-up thing. But at least you're in the front row with something that's getting to be closer to shovel ready.
my partner here has spent the last 2 days at the Pentagon or Department of War, whatever you call it now, and they're talking about all of our projects and our investments. So second trip there in a month, so clearly the government's making the right steps now. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not too late. Let's turn it around.
I'm curious for Cinco de Mayo. I know that Calico, we talked with Ross last week that the prices start to make sense around the 30s, 40s range of silver. Obviously, it's going to be fantastic for Calico, but with Cinco de Mayo, when they started that previous exploration a long time ago, what was the price of silver that they thought it still made sense comparatively to the $60 that we're seeing now?
There's never been an economic study done on Cinco de Mayo yet. So, anything I say is conjecture. But I would say that given that the calculated at or last resource was 385 grams silver equivalent, it probably works in mid-20s silver, right? It'll be different. It's going to make it at just about any price that we've probably seen in the last 2 or 3 years. So, and of course, in the mid-30s, it's going to start to look amazing. Like it's probably going to have a big IRR, but until we do the economics, we're just not going to know.
Yeah, before you do the economics, you got to get the final sign off and blessing by the ejidos down there. What do you think might be a reasonable, realistic time frame for that?
We're hoping. So look, right now we've got people going door to door, introducing them to the concept, introducing them to the proposal that we made to their local government. And I didn't have a chance yet, but someone just sent me that clip that was on 96.5, whatever that radio station is in Chihuahua City. And the guy was on there talking about Cinco de Mayo
Nice.
and this big offer that's Canadian mining companies made. So it's starting to percolate. My hope is that we're able to have a general assembly of that ejido late January. So, if we could have it January 25th, that'd be great. If not, maybe it's February 2nd or February 9th. But that's our hope, is to be around then. Clearly, we're pushing because we want to get going, but we also want to make sure that everybody's satisfied. I mean, there's always going to be a couple detractors to things, but we want the majority on side for what we're doing. I'm reminded of Silvercrest did to get the community on side, the farming community on side for Las Chispas. They did a 5-year water plan for the farmers and showed them that their investment, some funds diverted from the mine development into the water district, would enable farmers to get 2 crops a year instead of 1. And they'd be far more profitable. The farming industry would be better and everybody would win. That's what we want. If we can get there by the end of January, we're going to push to have that community vote then. If it takes a couple, 3 more weeks, so be it. It's coming.
Chris, as we come to the close, I know your mantra was, does math make sense? So I'd love for you to reiterate that the math quite makes sense for Apollo and Silver going into 2026.
Well, no question. And I think that any project that is nearing a development stage and development decision, you've got to start thinking more and more about the economics, because at the end of the day, that's why you're drilling and exploring in the first place. Are you eventually going to mine something and make money? As we all know, it's only a fraction of exploration projects that ever see development and then production out of it. And so you've got to like the behavior of silver. And I would just encourage people that understand that all of the talk in the marketplace in recent times about AI and about the Mag 7 and about a lot of this other stuff, data centers and everything like that, when you look at some of the ridiculous valuations and absurd, and I think in some cases mindless movements of money into stuff that's already obscenely priced, understand that with precious metals, and I think base metals and all commodities generally, I mean, we mentioned zinc. That's not a precious metal, but it's in shortage. It's going to go up in price, and we're going to need more and more of it down the road. Barite's the same, nickel's the same, copper's the same. All of these things. You're hardly out of the first inning yet on a lot of these moves, especially when you compare it to what we've seen in some of these other sectors. Don't wait for 10 years, folks. Place your bets now.
Well, let's think about this. What did silver peak in whenever it was, 1980,
Well,
81?
we had one peak in 1980, then we had another one in 2011.
But so in 1980, it peaked at it closed in the high 49s. It had an intraday of just over $50. Well, $50 in 1980 was a lot more valuable than $65 today. So inflation adjusted, we've still got a long way to go in the
For
silver
sure.
price, right? And
For sure.
gold, and like you said, gold, well, in 1971, gold was trading at $35 an ounce. And so what's it now? It's 130 times that price now.
Yeah.
So like Chris said, I think we're in inning 1 or inning 2 of a big long game. It's going to get more fun. There's going to be ups and downs along the way. Do your own homework, do your own research, but better to own hard assets than have a bunch of dollars in the bank or your pocket right now. So